Hey, welcome to the Explainer. So today we're cracking open a user's guide, but it's not for your phone or some new gadget. It's a user's guide for liberty itself, the Bill of Rights. Now, this isn't some dusty old history lesson. Nope, this is a living, breathing set of rules that people are fighting over, well, right this very second. So what's the big deal? What are these rights really promising us?
At the heart of it all is this one massive question. It's the puzzle the American founders were trying to solve. I mean, think about it. They had just thrown off a king, right? The very last thing they wanted was to mess around and build a new one by accident. So here's the challenge. How do you build a government that's actually strong enough to get things done, but not so strong that it ends up turning around and crushing the very people it's supposed to serve? And here's the answer, pretty much straight from the source, James Madison. He basically laid out the ultimate nightmare scenario. It wasn't just about having a bad president or a corrupt leader. No, the real terror, the definition of tyranny, was letting all the power, making the laws, enforcing the laws, and judging the laws fall into the same hands. That single fear, that's the blueprint for the entire American system of government. Everything flows from that one idea. Okay, so their first big idea, put the government on a leash, a really tight one. You see, the Constitution wasn't just some big to-do list for the government, outlining what it could do. It was actually the opposite. It was more like a carefully built cage, designed from day one to lock down power and keep it contained. And these 5 things, these are basically the bars of that cage. First up, you've got the rule of law. Super simple, but absolutely critical. Nobody is above the law. Not you, not me, and not the government itself. Then they split the power up. That's the separation of powers, into 3 branches so no one group could grab it all. But what if they team up? Well, that's where checks and balances come in, giving each branch the ability to literally block the others. And wrapped around all of that is due process and individual rights, which is just a way of saying the system has to play fair. It's kind of like a machine that's designed to run on argument and gridlock, which sounds bad, but it's actually a feature, not a bug. But not everyone was sold on this. There was this pretty loud group, the Anti-Federalists, and they looked at this new government, even with its cage and its leash, and they said, nope, not good enough. They were really worried that no matter how many limits you put in place, a big, powerful central government would eventually find a loophole and start stomping all over people's freedoms. So they demanded something more, an insurance policy, written down in black and white, a list of things the government was forbidden to do, period. And what they got was this number, 10. The first 10 changes or amendments to the Constitution. And listen, this was not just some footnote or an afterthought. This was the deal maker. It was the crucial compromise, the absolute guarantee of liberty that finally got the skeptical states to say, okay, we're in. Without these 10, the whole thing might have fallen apart. And this table here, this is the heart of that promise. It's a lot, so let's just break it down into a few big ideas. First, you've got your basic freedoms of expression, right? That's the First Amendment. It means you can think what you want, say what you want, and believe what you want. Then you've got your right to be left alone, basically. The Fourth Amendment says the government can't just barge into your house and search your stuff without a really good reason. And maybe most importantly, you have rights if you ever get in trouble with the law. The Fifth and Sixth Amendments make sure you get a fair trial, a lawyer, and you can't be forced to testify against yourself. So you see, it's not just a random list, it's a shield between you and the power of the government. All right, so we've got this awesome shield, this crystal clear list of protections. Everything's sorted. Simple, right? Well, this is where things get messy. What happens when my right to do something starts bumping up against your right to do something else? And that question right there brings us to probably the trickiest and honestly the most interesting part of this whole user's guide. Are these rights absolute? Can you just do whatever you want, whenever you want, and just yell, it's my right? The answer, and this might surprise you, is a hard no. Just no. The thing is, the Bill of Rights guarantees your freedoms, but it does it in the context of a whole society filled with other people who also have rights. And that means your freedom has to stop somewhere. They have limits, they have boundaries. And this really gets to the core tension of living in a free country. On one hand, the Constitution acts as a safeguard. It's a big wall protecting your rights from the government. But on the other hand, we as a society have to be able to limit those rights sometimes. And that's not a contradiction. It's a balancing act. It's the fundamental push and pull between your personal freedom and keeping society safe and orderly for everyone. And here's the key. Your rights can't be limited just because someone feels like it. There have to be really, really good reasons. We're talking about things like protecting public safety or promoting the common good or making sure your rights don't trample all over someone else's. The classic example you always hear is that you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. Sure, you have free speech, but why can't you do that? Because it creates a panic, it endangers public safety, and it violates everyone else's right to, well, not get trampled to death. It's this constant negotiation, this balancing act between what one person can do and what's good for the whole group. Okay, so if our rights are constantly bumping into each other and they have limits, who blows the whistle? Who steps in and makes the final call in these big constitutional fights? Who's the ultimate referee? Well, that job belongs to the courts, the judicial branch. And their real power, their superpower, if you will, comes from one single idea: independence. The whole system was designed to protect judges from the political winds blowing from Congress or the White House. The idea is to let them make rulings based on what the law says, not on what's popular or what will get them reelected. So how does this referee actually do its job? Well, they have a few key tools. The biggest one is called judicial review. This is the power to look at a law passed by Congress or an action by the president and say, nope, that violates the Constitution, it's void. This is how they actively protect our rights by interpreting what those sometimes vague phrases, like unreasonable search and seizure, actually mean in a real-world situation. The whole thing is set up to allow for their independent judgment, to make them the neutral party in the dispute. And that brings us right back to the million-dollar question. We know there's a line somewhere, a line between you exercising your rights and you harming someone else. But figuring out exactly where to draw that line, man, that is one of the hardest and most important jobs in a democracy.
And here's a fantastic real-world example of how the courts try to find that line. There was a huge Supreme Court case that came up with something called the clear and present danger test. What does that mean? Basically, it says your freedom of speech stops when your words are directly going to cause something illegal or dangerous to happen right now. So it's not just about the words you use, it's about the real-world effect of those words. And the courts are doing this all the time, creating and tweaking these kinds of tests to try and pin down that constantly moving line.
And that leaves us with this final thought. The old saying goes, your rights end where someone else's begin. It's easy to say, right? But the real question, the one we're still grappling with every single day, is this: who decides where that line is? Because at the end of the day, the Bill of Rights isn't some dusty old rule book that's set in stone. It's the playbook for a never-ending debate. And figuring out the answer to that question, that is the ongoing, messy, and absolutely essential work of democracy.